This video was originally supposed to be about taking my MacBook Pro and pairing that with a Razer Core X Chroma and to see if that would be a worthwhile replacement for the gaming computer, aka the truncator. However, now it's going to kind of turn into a rant more than anything because this was a pretty big disappointment and not really the way you would expect. So as far as the graphics card portion of this tool or periphery or whatever you want to call it, the eGPU, it was actually superb and playing was really good. I would say it would be a valuable replacement to the gaming computer. You could have this one device. However, the biggest kick in the nuts is the onboard USB 3.0 ports or 3.1 ports they have on here. And it's a pretty big problem. Now, I spent a little time on the internet trying to figure out if I could resolve the issue, but it didn't really seem like a lot of people were talking about it, and the people that were vocal were not really downvoted per se, but they were basically told that their devices might be problematic. But I don't think that's the case. Something is seriously wrong with the USB on board. For instance, when I first plugged everything in and got everything working, my mouse would intermittently disconnect. So as I was moving across the screen, it would stop, and then I'd continue moving the mouse, obviously, because I was trying to go somewhere on this massive screen, and it would just appear somewhere else that I didn't really expect because it was constantly disconnecting. And I had the same problem with pretty much any device I plugged into it. It would just connect, then disconnect, connect, disconnect. It was totally unusable. So during my perusing of the interwebs, I found that some people are suggesting to remove some number of devices, like only having 2 peripheral devices, or limit the number of devices that you had that use a lot of power. Now in my case, a mouse and keyboard don't really draw a lot of power in my opinion. Yes, the mouse is RGB, but the keyboard is not. It's a Mac keyboard. It doesn't have anything fancy to it. And while the keyboard did work, the mouse totally didn't. So I moved some of those devices onto the USB hub that's actually part of my monitor, and that remedied most of the issues. And I moved devices like the Xbox controller adapter on here, and the driver wouldn't even install. I would always get this driver error, and I tried many troubleshooting steps to get that to work. That device didn't work at all. Now, connecting one SATA device to the USB or the onboard USB ports also would intermittently work. It would work really well, but as soon as I would start transferring a large file or something significant in nature, this would just straight up disconnect from the system and crash Windows altogether, which was really strange. And so people were saying, oh, it must be a bad device. So I did try one of my other USB external hard drives or SATA drives, whatever you want to call it, and that failed as well, mostly because of the same issue. Now, I did have a lot more success with USB devices, such as this USB flash drive. This would stay connected, and I could push big files, let's say like 19 gigabytes in size to it, and it was perfectly fine, both on Windows as well as in the Mac OS. I had no problems there. But interestingly enough, probably one of the things I found most annoying was just you could only plug one thing into the USB ports, and that was about it. And that one thing was typically a mouse or keyboard. You can forget about anything advanced like a webcam or a controller or just really anything. It was pretty much useless. Now on the Mac OS side, it was actually a lot more usable. I actually managed to use, actually that's the wrong one. I actually managed to use my SATA SSD, or external SATA SSD on Mac OS perfectly fine. It never dropped. I transferred the same video files. It never had a problem there, and I also had mouse and keyboard attached to it. So it was actually 3 USB devices, no problem. Now the problem that I did face on Mac OS is that the onboard NIC that comes with this actually didn't work. Now, Razer says that if you go to their website, you can download drivers to make this work with macOS, the NICs work with macOS. But when you go to the download site and you click on the link, it downloads a Windows executable file. So does that mean I have to take that executable file onto a Windows platform, extract or run the executable, so it extracts some document and probably some drivers, then put those on a flash drive and plug it into this thing, because clearly the USB ports don't work, and then somehow copy those over? I don't know. I didn't even bother trying. Once I saw it was an executable file, I just threw my hands up in the air and said, this is absolutely ridiculous. So on the Mac OS side of the house, aside from I didn't even bother using the graphics card, but I did use the USB ports. That worked pretty fine. And on the Windows side of the house, the onboard NIC was phenomenal. So when I was trying to actually do some benchmarking and run some games, things of that nature, I had to run Steam off of my local NAS because I just didn't have enough storage for games that are like 50 gigabytes or bigger, because I only gave my Windows partition 42 gigs, which was almost fully occupied by Windows itself. So the whole point was to use an external device where I could keep my Steam library, so when I travel, I could still play games, on my MacBook, because it has an RX or 5060X or whatever the hell. It has a graphics card in there, so I could play games like Rocket League or something, but I don't want to keep all of those games on the actual device. I want them to be external. And that just wasn't possible with this device because the USB ports would just constantly disconnect. So whatever the case, I ran most of my Steam games off of my NAS through this NIC, and it was really good. Like, I didn't have any disconnects. I was able to do benchmarks. I was able to download games while playing games, and it never had one hiccup at all. And that was all using this, like, entirely. Playing games at 3440 by 1440, doing benchmarks 3440 by 1440, and doing file transfers in the background. It was not a problem at all. Now, it was really the USB NICs that really brought this product down to its knees. So I guess if I had to absolutely buy one, I would probably buy the step-down model that's only $299, because that one doesn't have USB ports or really any additional ports. You just get the USB Type-C 3.1 or whatever the hell it is, Thunderbolt, and pretty much your graphics card. And that's pretty much it, and power, I guess, if that counts for anything. And that's much cheaper. $300 is a lot more easy to swallow. But when you pay $400, having USB ports that actually work is kind of important. And the amount of people online defending Razer, saying it's not their fault that our devices, here's 5 devices right here that didn't work via these USB ports, unless I only used one at a time, which is totally just, I don't even have the words for it. It's just absurd that you would say that it's your problem, your devices are bad. So anyway, so the people that were complaining were pretty much getting all this negative feedback, and Razer doesn't acknowledge the problem exists. They say that if you have a problem with the device, you just send it to them. But the people that claim that they've sent this device back to Razer, they also say that they've just gotten back the same unit and still had the same problems and had multiple RMAs. One guy claimed he did 4 RMAs and there was no resolution to his problem at all, and he eventually just gave up altogether. And of course, it's past his 30-day return period, so he was kind of stuck with it. So I've had this thing for about 2 days, and I had maybe a solid 2 hours of actual gameplay. Some of that time was occupied by benchmarks, and some of the other time was occupied by actually playing Tomb Raider or Rocket League when I could or was able to. And it worked pretty well for those 2 days I had it. But then at some point I decided, you know what, I'm just going to stop trying to use USB. I'm going to use this thing as an external graphics card only. And for some reason, the NVIDIA graphics drivers uninstalled themselves. Not sure what that's all about. So I had to reinstall those, get the whole device reconnected. But then Windows would not boot up with this device connected. So I would boot up Windows without the device being connected, and I could actually see the Windows desktop and was able to play with it. But as soon as I would connect this thing, it would register, but then my monitor would never display. So I was never actually able to use this monitor in conjunction with the laptop. No matter what I tried, it would register. I could see that there were 2 displays, but I could never get it to actually display anything. So after troubleshooting that for what felt like several hours, and coming to no kind of resolution, I just decided this product is not good. It probably could be good, maybe with a different brand, or maybe my unit's just defective. I don't really know what, but this product is not for me at all. I'll just stick with the traditional gaming tower, and I'll just have a separate workstation for all my editing and a separate station for pure gaming. And at least with that thing, I can overclock the hell out of it, including the graphics card, and everything will be all fun and games. Wow, that was a big load. Now, after saying all of that, you guys have to remember I'm not a reviewer. I don't review products. This isn't a product review. This could be in fact, a faulty product, but I seriously doubt it. I think there's a lot of people out there that have these who aren't using the USB ports on board, and if they are, maybe they're having like 1 or 2 peripherals at most, and they're probably just keyboard and mice. And otherwise, if people are reporting issues, or if they are reporting issues, they are underreporting the issues big time, because this thing has some serious flaws, and especially at $400, it's kind of hard to let that stuff go. So much for doing a really cool video with something that is actually pretty cool. I mean, this thing has the potential for some serious awesomeness. If they included maybe just like 1 extra PCIe lane, you could even do onboard storage inside of here. Now, you could actually remove the USB 3.0 ports, but you'd lose your gigabit NIC, which you could substitute for a 10 gig NIC, which works, by the way, or you could substitute for like internal storage if I really wanted to, but it just doesn't look right when it's actually in the machine, and it becomes very ghetto. And I actually did think about dremeling out like a proper space on the back here for like a short bracket or half height bracket, but I decided I would just rather send it back and then use that $400 on something else. So I guess that's what we'll be doing in the next video, is trying to figure out what to buy. 10 gig switch, anybody? I don't know. Do you? I don't know. Well, anyway, I'm very sorry for the incredibly long rant, and I'm sorry for having a pretty uninteresting video. But hopefully you guys decide to stick around. If you don't, I understand. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.